This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You have my sword.
And you have my bow.
And my trowel.
Hi, you're listening to episode 47 of And My Trowel, where we look at the fantastic side of archaeology and the archaeological side of fantasy. I'm Tilly.
And I'm Ash.
And today is a momentous day, Ash.
Oh my god. Is Tom Bombadil coming to give a lecture?
What? No, although that would indeed be momentous, although probably very confusing as well.
Yeah, very confusing.
No, not that, although I would say even more momentous, because soon may come the day when we finally meet the Eagles.
The Eagles? As in the Eagles of Manwë, raised by the Valor, the all-seeing kings of the sky.
Yes, exactly. So let me share the scenario with you. So the Malgaroth Historical Society of Mirkwood Forest have decided to conduct an archaeological survey of the forest. But as you can probably imagine, nobody in the society particularly wants to actually conduct the survey on foot in the forest itself. So they have therefore requested that we work together with the great eagles who have agreed to work with us on this, to conduct an aerial survey of the forest and let them know whether there is anything that might require further investigation.
That's so exciting.
I know, right?
I can't believe that the Eagles have agreed to help us with this. Like, it actually makes me a little bit nervous.
Why?
Like, what if we get something wrong? What if we're up there on the Eagles, right, and they see something, and then they ask if we should investigate further, and we don't know? Do you know anything about aerial scanning?
No. But luckily, I have someone here who does. So, ta-da-da, it's as if we planned this. So let me introduce archaeologist Dr. Wouter Verschoof-Van Vaart, which the last time I said this was the other way around because we had your wife Sasha on in a previous episode, but it is Wouter Verschoof-Van Vaart. Welcome, Wouter.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Welcome to the quest, Walter.
Thank you.
So, indeed, we have, you may recognize, indeed, the last names or the amalgamation thereof. By the way, it took me the longest time to realize that you and Sasha, who is married to Wouter, and who we had on in a previous episode about Atlantis, which you can listen
lobsters.
to in the back catalogue. And lobsters. Oh, yeah, the little lobster of Atlantis. It took me the longest time to realize that you'd swapped your last names so that your original one was first and her original was first. Anyway.
Yeah, we did. And so far, I've mostly noticed that when you go to conferences, they are really annoyed because all the name tags have to be changed. Like, it doesn't fit in the program.
It is a fun name to say once you know how to say it. I mean, it's fun. It really rolls off the tongue. But so, Wouter, we have already heard indeed from Sasha, your lovely wife, but you are in a very different area of archaeology, although I believe you're in multiple areas of archaeology. So what actually is your kind of specialism and how did you get to the path where you are today?
Yeah, my most recent endeavor is as a forensic archaeologist at the Netherlands Forensic Institute. But before that, I did a PhD and I'm mostly specialized in the use of remote sensing. So actually aerial scanning, as you called it earlier. And before that, I've been a field archaeologist, as most archaeologists in the Netherlands.
Start off in.
Shovel bums, we all are.
Nice.
And what is it that you're working on now, Wouter?
With my job as a forensic archaeologist, I mostly assist the police in cases where people are missing and are likely murdered and buried.
Oh, wow. So it's proper forensic archaeology.
Yes.
proper.
I don't know what I expected it to be. I'm not sure
it's
what
too proper.
What non-proper forensic archaeology would be. But, oh, wow, that's really interesting. But but had you done like osteoarchaeology or anything like that? How did you get from aerial scanning to forensic analysis? Like, yes.
Should we like call up the Eagles and be like, look, we're in check. We've got a different thing to
I'm
talk
sorry.
about today.
I'm so sorry. We thought we had an aerial scanning specialist, but it turns out we have a forensic archaeologist.
Maybe a later episode.
Been a murder in the Shire.
Yes. Oh, yes. We can do murder mystery. Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Okay, yes, I'm making a note of this. But sorry, anyway. But yes, my question was indeed, how did that jump occur? That seems like quite a jump.
Yeah, there was a vacancy opening up for a forensic archaeologist, and they specifically wanted somebody who had a specialty in remote sensing.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I applied and got the job.
So how does that translate then into forensic archaeology?
So actually, one of the things we use remote sensing for quite often is to look for the graves that we are hoping to excavate. They're called clandestine graves because they're not like at a cemetery or anywhere. One of the ways to look for those is remote sensing.
Okay, so it's more just like literally bodies that are buried somewhere.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
And I suppose you could cover quite a lot of area as well.
Yeah,
With
exactly.
that. Yeah,
Those things.
wow.
It's amazing. Which just goes to show, because I feel like a lot of people assume that if you go into one like line of archaeology or one specific focus or specialism, that's it. That's your path. That's the
You're
only
stuck looking at
thing you can
potsherds
do
for the rest of your life.
Exactly. But so you mentioned, Wouter, that you started off as a field archaeologist, but were you already doing things like, I don't know, drone, or was it just that you just happened to fall into? Because I think a lot of people, they've asked us a few times, how do you become an archaeologist? And then you say, there's not really one way to do it. So it's always fun to see the route that different people took. Did you always want to do things with scanning? Did you just fall into it?
When I started out as a field archaeologist, I also started working as a geophysicist.
Oh, okay.
So doing geophysical surveys. And of course, making the jump from geophysics to remote sensing is not that big.
Okay.
And I always really liked using GIS, so geographic information systems, and that sort of added together. And just,
I feel like you're
digital
one of
archaeology.
I feel like you're one of the few people in the world who I've ever heard say, I really enjoyed using GI.
Yes, I was literally just about to say that. I was like, it is literally the devil. Like the devil's work. If you get 1 point wrong, that's it. You have to go back and then you have to find the map and then, there's that. And gosh.
There are some like-minded individuals, but I know. I gave GIS at the university for a couple of years as a teaching assistant, and most students are of a different opinion than I.
The amount of breakdowns I think archaeologists have had over GIS. I think everyone who is an archaeologist listening can relate to that. Like that absolute fear, like, oh my God, all my information's gone. Where is it?
I think, though, we do need to, because there might also be a lot of people listening who really have no idea what GIS is. So what is GIS?
Basically, it's computer software that lets you analyze and process geospatial information. So any information that has a coordinate attached to it, that represents something on the Earth. That's the simplest way to explain it, I think.
Yeah. And as well, I was wondering, can you tell the listeners what geophysical survey is as well?
Yes, and by the listeners, I mean me.
Yeah. So geophysics are all these different sensors, measuring devices that measure something about the Earth's surface, but then from close by. So you carry them around while you're walking on a field or you're riding on a field.
Oh, that's these things, the like H-shaped thing,
Yes.
right? Like the pole setup that people walk around.
Yeah, that one, for instance, is called a magnetometer, and it measures very slight variations in the Earth magnetic field, which are caused by people digging a pit and filling it up again.
Okay, not adding in, I was there thinking, people have dropped their phone. But no, okay, it's more
Those as well.
Those Iron Age people just losing all their things. Yeah, exactly. Okay, interesting. No, because it's one of those situations where I've worked with now the problem is I only know it in German, tachymeter. The thing that's on like a tripod and it's got a thing on top of it that you look through, and someone else is standing on the other side of the field with a pole.
Yeah.
And what's that called in English, Dash?
You've actually just made me completely go blank. Even though, it was a surveying, essentially. You're just taking your GPS points. So you take like your drawing points, your levels and stuff like that from it too.
And is that what the sort of thing that you then also use in, for example, GIS? Or is that a completely different system?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called total stationing.
That's right.
That's it.
Thank you. I love how the non-native speaker is.
You actually put me under so much pressure there. I was like, it's yellow. I can see it.
Oh my gosh, I even knew that. I even knew it was called a total station. Thank you, Wouter.
I got shouted over points about it. I definitely think the trauma just set in entirely there. It completely blanked my mind.
Yeah. Okay. So the total station. So that's what people on archaeological sites, there'll be people digging, but there'll also be people standing with a tripod thing and another pole. And that's basically, or in our world, you'll see the wizards with their staffs. That's probably.
Yes,
similar.
that's exactly when we excavated
Weathertop.
Yeah, that's what the wizards use.
That's what they were using. Yeah, nice. And then if you're doing more sort of aerial surveying things, so we have had discussions about this before. We actually had that same discussion when we were excavating Weathertop. I'm more of a lab archaeologist. I'm more of a lab rat rather than a field mouse, whereas Ash was saying she's probably more of a field mouse than a lab rat, which is why we make such a good team. But would you say working in aerial scanning, because it sounds like you do still have to be outside a lot, but I guess you're also based a lot at the computer. What is the kind of, what would you expect if someone is wanting to go into that focus or that specialism? What can they expect from a working environment?
Yeah, it really depends on which part of the aerial scanning you're doing. Because, of course, nowadays a lot is done with drones. And so that is really outside. You're in the field with this drone taking measurements. But after that, it's mostly indoors.
Yeah,
so behind the computer.
The best of both worlds.
I was about to say, this sounds like something quite nice. You get to go out, you get to play with fun technology, and then you get to go inside and, in my case, have a breakdown because the computer's not working for me. But like, if you enjoy GIS, then that kind of thing. And it sounds like, indeed, then this is the kind of, it's a sort of skill that is more widely applicable because, as you said, you now work more with, I guess, crime departments and things. There are other areas that it is also can be applicable for outside of archaeology.
Oh, yes, certainly. For instance, just mapping the Earth is, of course, if we open our Google Maps, of course, all the data in there is also gathered by aerial scanning. So making maps by itself uses aerial scanning. But for instance, also in the Netherlands, water management is a very important thing.
Because the whole country is technically under sea level, right? No, not the whole country, but
the western part is.
A lot of it.
But so for water management and also for seeing if the dikes are still fine, for instance, that's also where aerial scanning is used for.
There we go.
And of course, self-driving cars is another.
Is it aerial scanning?
Yes, they use a form of aerial scanning to see if there are any pedestrians.
Oh, God. What if a seagull flies in front of the camera at the wrong time?
Oh, you not seen it when they do like ridiculous things? The cars, like they stop in the middle of like really built up areas and then like people can't get past and then they lock people in and then there's like loads of problems with them.
Yes, that's mostly caused by that.
Yeah.
The seagull is now a pedestrian and that's why it can't move.
Yeah, so it has to stop. There's a fly on the camera or something. There's just so many issues. I much prefer living in this fantasy world.
What is LiDAR as well?
Yeah, so LiDAR is one of these remote sensing techniques. It stands for light detection and ranging.
Ooh.
And it's basically a technique to measure a distance between the sensor, so the thing that is measuring, and another point in space. LiDAR is mostly used to map the Earth's surface, and so elevation differences within the Earth's surface by having one of these LiDAR sensors under a plane or under a drone, and then sending out laser beams straight down to the surface, and then measuring how long it takes for that beam to go down, hit the Earth's surface, and reflect back to the sensor.
Oh, that's like sci-fi, isn't it?
I was about to say. It also sounds like they were like, I want this to spell out LiDAR. What words can we use that would make that thing? Because it's like, it sounds like odd. Anyway, sorry. Yes.
Radar, but opposite.
Yes. It was based off the technique that radar also uses. So they were like, oh, but now we're not using radio waves, but now we're using light beams.
What should we possibly call it? Oh, let me rack my brain for a really imaginative title. I know.
It is witchcraft, it really is. But with LiDAR and geophys and all the aerial surveys and stuff, you mentioned before about Google Maps, and Google Maps is information, right? So what do we get? Does it look like that when it comes out as information when we're taking all these different survey points? Is it this lovely picturesque map of Google Earth, or is it a bit more jumbled than that? What does the information look like, and how do we transfer that into archaeological information?
Yeah, so with Google Maps, these are aerial images. So they're photographs taken by a satellite or from an airplane. And so these images, of course, have to be what they call rectified, have to be made flat and made sure that the distances are correct within the image. So that's a bit different than, for instance, with LiDAR, where you have this laser, this sensor that sends out laser beams.
Pew, pew, pew.
But of course, yeah, exactly.
That's the sound it makes, right? Like when you do it,
Yeah.
it's like Star Wars style.
Yeah, very Star Wars-y, Death Star style. But
sorry, serious conversation here. Yes.
That's how I'm going to imagine you doing your work now.
Wouter just going through the field. So sorry, laser beams. It turns out.
yes,
laser beams.
and so if you would do that once, of course, you get one measurement, but that's not enough. So you do this million of times. And then you have all these measurement points. You, of course, have to process those. And what you do is basically sort out all the points that are really points that hit the Earth's surface and all the points that are not. For instance, if there is a tree, of course, this laser beam will also hit the leaves on the tree. And so some of
or the
these laser
seagull
beams,
flying past.
flying
seagull. Sorry.
And you can imagine a house or a car.
Yes.
Right.
For archaeologists, that's not interesting. For other things it is, but for archaeologists it's not. So you filter those out until you're left with only the points that are from the ground, from the Earth's surface. And from that you make what they call a digital elevation model. So you basically interpolate those into one continuous image.
Nice. Wow. Okay. So that seems like we have definitely come to the right person then.
Yes.
But not just for this quest, it seems, but also maybe future ones too.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. Maybe let's just have a very quick break and we can have a quick look through our current list of contracts and see if we might be able to use your skills elsewhere as well.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everyone. So indeed, we had a look through and it seems like we could definitely use Wouter's skills for some of our other projects. So I will be in touch, Wouter, after this as well.
But I have a question. Okay, so I know that, Wouter, you have a wide range of experience of archaeological topics, but are you also a fan of fantasy fiction?
The short answer is yes.
Yay! But it's fine. Luckily, we're on a podcast, so you're allowed to give the long answer.
Yes, please do.
So what kind of fantasy are you into?
Yeah, a lot of different things. I was looking through my...
I can hear you moving away.
Yeah, you're going to
go and get your books.
I'm like, you're going to a bookshelf. We know what that sounds like.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at my bookcase. And like... Yeah, I have been into fantasy and fantasy books for, I think, at least 25 years.
Yep.
I have been playing Dungeons and Dragons for 25 years this year. That sort of should already give a sort of warning. But so if I have to choose like my favorite fantasy books, I will probably choose the first ones I read after Lord of the Rings, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, which were the Dragonlance chronicles by Margaret, Weis and Tracy Hickman.
Nice.
They're very classic high fantasy books.
Ooh, I haven't heard of these.
Yeah, and the books by Raymond Feist are also a magician and the whole series.
Yeah, I've never read those, but I always want to.
Oh, they're really good.
Okay, I have to.
I've read them many times.
See, okay, no, we'll come back to this. Carry on. Yes. Okay.
So are those your favourite series? So Lord of the Rings, Dragonlance, Chronicles, and like The Magician?
Yeah, I think so. They're mostly also the most nostalgic ones.
There is something with fantasy and nostalgia, isn't there? Something that you read when you're younger, it just sticks with you and you're like, yes, this is me forever. This is my personality.
It is. At a certain point, you become a nerd and then you just stay a nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is an evolution. You watch Lord of the Rings and you're like, okay.
You're like, give me my sword. Give me my cloak. I'm ready.
I'm ready. Let's go.
But so it sounds indeed like you're more into the high fantasy. So is that still something that you pursue now as well? You more go for the big epics?
I also, for instance, enjoy the a little bit less high fantasy books like The Lies of Locke Lamora from Scott Lynch.
Yeah, they were a good one.
I really enjoyed. But I'm basically constantly reading different fantasy books.
I wonder whether there is a strong overlap between fantasy and archaeology in terms of, obviously there is because that's why we're here now, but I mean in terms of the progression to become an archaeologist that we were just talking about in the last one. Although we have a lot of our guests haven't necessarily been into fantasy, right, Ash? So I don't know if that's necessarily
I think there is. I think there's a tie between world building and archaeology. I think that's what we do in archaeology is we build an interpretation of a past society or activity on a site, and it is a bit like a story. So I think there's that same kind of interest in culture and in people in fantasy because they're so deep. Like the worlds are, especially high fantasy.
Especially these ones, yeah.
Like high fantasy is so interesting because you'll have like certain objects that are only found in that world, and that means so much. So I think there's something that innately in us archaeologists that just like a bit of fantasy.
I think you're totally right. I think most of the people start out and coming for the swords and the knights and the Vikings and that kind of stuff, and just stay for indeed the world building and the storytelling. Because as an archaeologist, you often try to tell a story, but you basically have half of the jigsaw pieces and none of the corners.
And you're missing like 20% of the pieces, right?
There's a few broken ones you've had to stick together.
Some of them are from another jigsaw that like you thought fitted, but then it turns out like actually this doesn't fit. And some people try to force them. Oh my gosh, we could do a whole metaphor about this. Someone probably has already.
But you can do like such an archaeological deep dive into one particular like world. People have done it. I've talked about it before on Skyrim and stuff. They go into it, and the archaeology of gaming as well. It's the same sort of branches of fantasy. So I definitely think there's a connection. Yeah, has to be.
They had that. You were probably involved in that then, Wouter. Were you the project that was based at Leiden University, and they were looking at archaeology in video games, or what was it called?
I know about
with Aris.
Yes, I wasn't really involved in that.
Okay.
I'm not so much into video games. More of a
not Baldur's Gate fan though. Dungeons and Dragons.
Except for Baldur's Gate.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's Baldur's not a video game. That's Baldur's Gate.
Baldur's Gate is different. It's different. It's so good.
Oh, interesting. I must say I'm not a video games person really either. So
I've got 1,000 hours in Baldur's Gate 3.
I got a couple hundred in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. So I haven't started on 3.
3 you'll be lost in completely. The world is insane. So it's so well done in comparison to the previous ones. They're very good too, obviously. But but I was wondering, have you read anything that features the concept of kind of aerial scanning in fantasy fiction? That's to both of you.
So I was at first, of course, thinking about Lord of the Rings, whether there's any equivalent of aerial scanning in that. Mm-hmm. And I haven't found many examples in Lord of the Rings. I could come up with the Palantirs.
Oh,
you can look at a place far away.
Yeah.
But of course, you don't really know if you see what's really there or if you just see what somebody else wants you to see. That is a tricky one. Yeah. And the only other thing I could find was you have the Seat of Seeing on Amon Hen.
Oh.
Where Frodo sits on while wearing the ring before they are attacked by the Uruk-hai.
Yeah.
And
also known as Ariana Grande. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Because of the ponytails and
the true. There was a trend at some point, right, with the photos side by side of the Urukai with his big high ponytail, and then Ariana Grande with a high ponytail, and they looked identical.
It was literally the same. I was like, wow, style.
Sorry, Ariana. Sorry, because you're definitely listening to this podcast. But yeah, sorry, the throne of seeing, or the seat of seeing.
Yeah, the seat of seeing. And so, actually, in preparation for this podcast, I was looking into that because I remembered that was a way to see very far away.
Okay.
But there's actually a whole discussion going on the internet whether the seat is magical or the fact that Frodo wears the ring causes him to see.
So you need the combo, maybe.
Yeah.
To unlock it. That's so interesting.
Because it makes sense, right? If anyone would sit down, they'd maybe see a little bit, but then because you've got the ring and the seat, it's double. Yeah.
Because I think in the books, Aragorn sits on it at a certain point as well, but he only sees an eagle very far away.
Oh, okay.
Which is apparently the eagle carrying Gandalf. So it is...
Oh, so he sees it in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm sure Peter Jackson, did he not use the seat of seeing as inspiration for... Because in the films, the Eye of Sauron can scan everywhere, right? It's pure watching, like Big Brother-esque kind of thing. And I'm sure he used that as like the concept for the ring. So whenever like Frodo puts it on, like Sauron knows where he is. But that doesn't really happen in the books.
No, true. Yeah, you don't have that. Yeah, and also though, the whole... I guess the Palantir and the Stone of Seeing, because I suppose the aerial scanning that we're talking about is more, it's not that you would have your LiDAR, or how does that work actually? We're going to get to that later. Because indeed, I was really struggling to think of something with aerial scanning in it. Because indeed, also all I could think of was things where you look in and you see something far away. But yeah, I don't know, did you find any, Ash?
I did think of one, but it's more sci-fi fantasy, which we have talked about.
We've talked about how sci-fi is basically fantasy.
Which is the Shipbreaker series by Paolo Bacigalupi. And thank you very much. It was a terrible pronunciation, but I even Googled it beforehand. But basically, the world has drastically been affected in that series from like climate change, actually climate collapse. Oh. And they have futuristic... We say futuristic in quotes because actually it's not really futuristic.
Yeah, climate collapse. That's not something that happens in the modern day.
They have futuristic technology that allows them to scan and navigate these landscapes.
Ah, okay.
And they have a lot of like cross genetic mutations of like cats into humans and stuff like that too, and like big huge elephants, and they can like use this technology on the big huge elephants. So it's scanning the whole world to see if there's anything.
Okay.
Like where they can go and mapping themselves. So that's one I could think of.
Yeah, I feel like it is.
That's that LiDAR.
It does indeed seem, I guess sci-fi is indeed more focused on technology. It would be more likely to have things that are, I'm just thinking of like the Star Wars films, and they have so many scanning things, right, in that. So
like if we could bring huge elephants into archaeology, I'd be really up for it. Personally, so we could just do all of our work, put the total stations, like
right,
on
just on the end of their trunk. They just be like. But I had a little look in the magic mirror, aka AI, see if they could come up with anything, because I was really struggling. I literally couldn't think of anything. I was looking through my books, I was trying to think of stuff. I know, but then I thought, you know what, I'm going to use the magic mirror just to see. And oh my goodness, they came up with a lot. So there was a couple that came up with for example, by Brandon Sanderson, who is also a very well-known name within fantasy fiction. So in the Stormlight Archive, apparently there's sort of aerial magic, which are various magical abilities that allow individuals to perceive and manipulate things in the environment. So there's a spren, which is the manifestation of natural force, and surges, which are powers related to the sort of forces of nature. And apparently there's some characters who can use these things, so the spren and the surges, to see more than the human eye. So it's magical perception.
Does he not also have that kind of stuff in Mistborn series?
Yes, I think so. Let me have a look through. Yes, exactly. So indeed, they have it in the Mistborn. So something called allomancy, which is something that is used to detect or scan things in the environment. So it's aerial-like scanning is also possible in that one as well. So allomancy, there we go. We need to
There you go.
just look at that. But then, there's quite a few other ones that came up. Speaking of geophysics, in the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, there's geology and earth magic. So there's apparently characters who possess the power of orogeny, which sounds sexier than it is.
We came up with LiDAR.
We came with LiDAR. They have allomancy and orogeny, which, manipulate and sense the earth and the surroundings. So they can sense disturbances or seismic shifts. So that's more kind of moving things. So awareness of the environment. But I guess they could also use that probably for looking at things. The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, which I couldn't remember this, but apparently at the Arcane University, there's a protagonist where you can learn different forms of magic, including sympathy, which allows people to sense and track things and give a sort of perception that is like scanning. So, So there's a couple of other ones which we'll add to the list. So there's the Inheritance trilogy as well by N.K. Jemisin, where the gods have powers that allow them to kind of sense and scan things. The Magicians by Lev Grossman, where you have magic in a kind of, again, way of sensing or detecting. So there's definitely like a pattern here. It's more sensing in terms of being able to perceive things.
Yeah, like a perception of something.
And it's all related to magic and the kind of, But one thing that did come was, I guess, more of a sci-fi one called The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu, which is something called sky engines. So flying machines.
Oh my God, cool.
That are powered by technology and power, and they are sometimes used to scan the environment or gather information from above. That sounds exactly like what we were just talking about with Google Maps. Again, they don't.
It's just a magical Google.
It's basically just magical Google Maps. And then you also have the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, where you have something called, the characters are called chromaturges. Again, LiDAR, chromaturges. But anyway, use the manipulation of light to create visual illusions or to scan for information from the environment. So again, that's a lot more related to the things we were talking about.
But that's not really aerial, is it?
Yeah, it's more just sending it out from you. Yeah, like a wave.
Yeah, I do think that in a lot of fantasy series, you have this sort of concept of clairvoyance.
Yeah.
Where you can see someplace else from afar. Or if you know the place, you can spy in and look at it. Or things.
Yeah, that's true, actually. But then, it doesn't really translate to like airborne kind of plan view of stuff, because that would make so many books so easy, wouldn't it?
Right.
Like, if they had that, you'd be like, I'll just look at this castle from above, and that's how we get in. And
look, there's a secret entrance. Excellent.
Brilliant. Sorted.
Done.
There was a tunnel there. I can get through there, and then.
But aren't there any books where people can change into birds? Because then, of course, you could look from above.
You could do the scanning and more the photography method that you mentioned, right? Like doing aerial viewing. There's definitely So, I was wondering how I was going to bring in Discworld to this episode. Here we go. In literary Pratchett books. In the Witches series, or the Witches sub-series, Granny Weatherwax can do borrowing. So she doesn't transform into a bird, but she can basically send her mind out into different animals and creatures, and she goes out into a bird, and then she'll be the bird basically as it's going around, and then she goes back into her thing. So she does indeed, she scans, she becomes an eagle in one of them, I think, and then she's following the path of the figure running through the forest, and all of that kind of stuff.
Like immediately when we discussed doing this episode, when I was thinking about fantasy books, but it wasn't even a book, it's a game. And I immediately thought of Assassin's Creed, because you have a little eagle or a bird with you, and every single game, it is like a staple of the game, that can fly out and look, and you can plan your attacks and things like that from the bird's eye view. And then you have to go to different sync points, and that sync point is always really high up, so you can get a layout of the land.
Okay.
So I always think of Assassin's Creed whenever I think of like LiDAR, which is maybe why I'm not in archaeology anymore.
But indeed, it seems more like sort of sci-fi books and fiction use the scanning a lot, but in fantasy it's more, like you were saying, Wouter, more like sort of perception and seeing, far seeing.
And it seems very personal as well. It's always like a person rather than a machine, or like they're searching for something themselves. Do you know what I mean? And it's like a magical force within them that they send out rather than something else doing it for you.
What would be the archaeological equivalent of that?
Interpretation.
Hey! Oh, is that a moth fluttering at the window? Very persistent.
Oh my goodness, Tilly, that's probably a message from the eagles.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Okay, everyone stay calm, stay calm. Let's just let it in and see what it wants. We need to cut short this episode of Am I Trowel, but don't worry, we will be continuing next episode with part 2 in our discussions with Wouter all about aerial scanning. In the meantime, as always, please do subscribe, follow, wherever you get your podcast. It really helps us to support the show. Also, if you want to show your support in more tangible ways, you can join the Fellowship of the Trowel by purchasing your very own swag. Check out our Dashery storefront at arcpodnet.dashery.com. where you can find all of these links, plus all of our contact information, as well as further information on what we discussed today in the show notes.
The Archaeology Podcast Network is 10 years old this year. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy, our social media coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht, and our chief editor is Rachel Roden. The Archaeology Podcast Network was co-founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in 2014 and is part of Cultura Media and DigTech LLC.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.